Okay, so how we've been learning till now was that we introduced the idea of how Hashem created the world, and we talked about the time, the difference between the state of pre-Tzimtzum, the idea of how godliness was pervasive prior to Tzimtzum, and then the differential post-Tzimtzum. That is to say, we taught that prior to Tzimtzum, everything in existence, the entire world, um, um, prior to, or when I say world, I mean the spiritual existence that existed. Godliness was everywhere, and we use the term till now. We use the term that prior to Tzimtzum, godliness was in a state of pshittas. We explained what that meant was that the spirituality of godliness and the existence of godliness and the feeling of godliness pervaded and was a basic concept throughout the state of spirituality. A state where there is something different from Hashem, that is the idea of Metzias, existence without Hashem, was something which was foreign, something which was new, and something which seemingly is a new conception, a novel perception, not one understood. Prior to Tzimtzum, such an awareness is contrary, runs counter to the inherent existence of everything, because godliness pervades everything. Post-Tzimtzum, the idea of being post-Tzimtzum means the idea of that there can be an other, there can be some other existence which is denying God or not perceiving godliness. That is noble. Post the Tzimtzum, therefore, then the expression that we say is that godliness is b'pshittas. The post Tzimtzum, sorry, we say that Metzias is b'pshittas, and godliness is ischatshus, is a new thing, something that we don't readily perceive. Okay, so once we move from that idea, the idea that godliness has been constrained and is not seen by everything that was made to exist afterwards, where godliness is not known inherently, which we said that means that Metzias is b'pshittas and godliness is b'eschatshus. That affects the entire stratum of all the spiritual worlds, from the highest to the lowest. Therefore, it conceptually means before the chet eitzedas, before the sin of the eating of the fruit in Gan Eden, every godliness was pervasive everywhere, and Metzias and going against Hashem was not was not conceivable. However, after the sin of in the Gan Eden, the eating of the tree of knowledge, there was a role reversal, and godliness was hidden, and therefore godliness became, as we said, godliness is b'eschatshus, and Hashem Metzias is recognizable, is everywhere, but isn't in a state of what we said pshittas, while godliness is b'eschatshus. Okay, so that's how we've explained the difference between pre-Tzimtzum state and post-Tzimtzum state. Now, what we've also said is that the whole of existence has been affected by the Tzimtzum. So anybody who has, any human being, lofty souls, high neshamas, who have attained an understanding and comprehension of godliness, their inherent orientation, as we've said, was a personal identity, and godliness was not known till they worked on themselves and they got to a point where their divine service reached a point where they could, where they could see godliness. And an example of that is Abraham Avinu, who began his spiritual quest to understand godliness, and he was aware of his own self and came to recognize God only after years of contemplation and beginning his journey till came to an understanding of God. So therefore that means that even after he attained the revelation and understanding of godliness, notwithstanding that, his initial contemplation and his initial orientation always is the otherness, is the idea of his self, but understanding godliness, that godliness exists and pervades the world. But his personal inherent conception is through his own self, which means through his own limited understanding. Therefore, which that means through his, what we said, Metzias. So therefore his spirituality is bizchachas, we use the expression, and the physicality, or his material existence, or the material existence is b'pshitas. So where we got up to the Maimer is that point, but post, when we will continue back in the text, right, we talk about that there are some lofty souls that the curtain, this curtain of separation of understanding of spiritualism is initially always pierced. That even though they come and these lofty souls exist in the spiritual, exist in this physical world, nevertheless they are uniquely gifted, so that they still understand things, and they're still within this world. So even for those very lofty souls who have attained an understanding and comprehension of godliness, since their inherent orientation was yeshus, through personal identity, a Metzias existence that appears other than godliness, it's just that their divine service, through their divine service, that through their divine service they've reached a connection with godliness. And as we said, we gave the example of Avraham, that he had to work on himself. There are, however, souls from whom the curtain has been pierced, who even as they descend in this material realm, they maintain their awareness of godliness above, without being affected by the effects of the tzimtzum. And these are uniquely gifted souls which belong in the realm of Atzilus, because as we've explained, Atzilus is connected to godliness continuously, and they see with a different set of vision. They see with the vision of godliness intact always. So, for example, the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, Olav Shalom, as well as all the Rebbes of Chabad, and certainly all the Rebbes of Chabad, who see this world from the viewpoint, with the glasses of Atzilus, with the viewpoint of the higher spiritual world, that they see everything from the viewpoint of godliness. So even though we ourselves, limited beings as we are, we don't see that. but we don't have souls of that quality. But the souls of the quality of the Rebbeim are capable of seeing with the what we talk about with the glasses of godliness, as if they put on glasses of godliness and see the world as if they see the godly sparks in everything that exists. Just like we talk about, that if you're in a forest, you can't see everything what's going on. But as soon as you rise above the forestry, you can understand what goes on. So the different rebbeim, that the Rebbes of Chabad have got that vision, that they're being able to see the in some sort of sense at least, like the vision from the higher spiritual world, where the obstruction of Metzias, the obstruction of physicality doesn't impede their overall vision of seeing godliness in the world. So that's where we got up. That's the ideas that we got up to in the text. So let's go back into the text and complete what's written there, because this vision of from the point of view of Atzilus will be the vision that we will see at the time of Mashiach, at the time of the resurrection, the time of the ultimate point where as we spoke in our verse, that godliness will be totally revealed. So starting at that text again, V'hainu, and therefore, even shagam neshamas hayesenalis, even for those souls which are so exemplary and so holy, shiagia bavadosam, that they achieve through their personal service, lahavona, to an understanding, bahasoga, and a comprehension, that not only do they have the understanding, but they'll be able to see with a physical vision godliness everywhere. So they understand Belokos, they have an understanding and comprehension of godliness because of their divine service that's powered by their soul to be able to understand that. Bagam lahakora be'elokus. So therefore there'll be a recognition of godliness, ba'ad lebachinas rio, to the point where we'll be able to see things with a physical vision, but we'll be able to see with a physical vision godliness in the world. And that level of understanding, of seeing with your eyes in a physical sense, but then seeing spirituality with your physical eyes, like we've spoken about before, that a person says that when a person understands something, he says, I hear it, and now I understand. A person will be able to say that I can see it, and people say they see it with their mind, but that level of seeing will be physical, and that will be so strong that we will convert from the state of, we'll convert from the state where Metzias is B'Yischachus, that we will convert to that state that Metzias changes from being pshitas, from this what we normally recognize, to, we will say, Metzias B'Yischachus, spirituality spirituality will be in a way that we can see it. So we will then say that spirituality is in a state of pshitas and Metzias is B'Yischachus. And that's the wording that we continue with the Maimah with. Hine kol zehu b'Yischachus. So all of that will come into a state of B'Yischachus, a new understanding. Shari han chosam kodemes hu inyan hayeshes v'Metzias, because prior to that change, the hanchosam, the orientation that we have starts from a point of view of our own physicality. So, as he says, the prior state of orientation will be that the inyan of Yeshus is Yeshus and the Metzias are primary. that is, their revelations of understanding and vision of spirituality will be other than godliness. Ela she'al yedei avodosam, but through their divine service, yehagio lebechinas elokus, they will come to a level of godliness, k'may Avraham Avinu, Shaseda Shehikir Sabera, like Avraham Avinu came to recognize his creation, Elam, and he'll come that through the world. Nevertheless, he came that through his meditations. Kidi Isra Medrash, as the Medrash says, Amosha La'odam Sheyera Bi'ira, like a person of like the example in the Medrash, which says about a person, Shura'o Bi'ira, he saw a palace, and he wondered, could this palace possibly exist without an owner? In other words to say, can something exist without there being an owner to it? And so also Abraham came to the understanding of the existence of the world by seeing everything in this physical world and saying, could it be that there wasn't a creator who put everything in this place? And as the Maimon continues, At Shehet Sitz Olav, Baal Habiro, and the Medrash continues and says that the owner of that palace came out. V'oman, he said, Ani hua Baal Habiro, I am the owner of this palace. I am the owner over here. So Cain Otzitz Olav HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So also Hashem appeared to Avram and told him, Amali Ani hu Bala Elam, I'm the creator of the world. But Kivan Sha'anocha Kademas hu inyan Matziyas. And even for such lofty souls, how much more so for mankind as a whole, since our innate orientation is that there has to be a Matziyas, that godliness exists, the other way around, that Kivan Sha'anocha Kademas, the first person's first initial understanding, the first initial perception of godliness is that his own vision of his limitfulness and his physicality and his perception of the world. That's what he thinks is reality. But Avram moved from that standpoint. From that standpoint, he moved on and he understood from everything that was in the world, he came to perceive that there's godliness. But even after they attain that knowledge of godliness, it's possible for a person that even though you attain this level of appreciation that godliness exists in the world, nevertheless it's very easy and to go back to that level of consciousness, that level of thinking that a person can move himself back to, and therefore Eina Mufrach, and therefore it's not impossible that Hanocha Kademus Chas v'Shalom, that a person goes back to that state of wonderment and think that the world revolves, that the world, its whole entity is full of Matziyas, and then what happens is that even though he might intellectually understand the godliness, but nevertheless this awareness remains in him in a state of intellectual conception, but not necessarily changes his being or pervades him, all of that. So why is that? Because it's to the point where we need to remind ourselves, and we have to remember all the blessings which Hashem said, and that's why we say in our prayers, we constantly remind ourselves that Hashem and His blessings are with us, because a person's initial reaction to everything is that his physicality is all pervasive, and godliness is is not the pervasive thing. So a person has to constantly remind himself. However, there are some neshamas, as we said, that the curtain is pierced, which we are just about to say. But this perception of that the world of everything and man's inherent orientation towards physicality and limitations is because is because of that's how of the tzimtzum that Hashem created in the world. But for those souls whom the curtain has been pierced, how they exist, those souls, how they exist in the realm of spirituality, where the curtain, where tzimtzum is not affecting them. Right? There are some that, as we say, as the expression says, the curtain has parted, and therefore they continue that vision, that viewpoint. They can maintain that viewpoint and that attitude as from above, from their existence in the higher world. They do that in the lower world, and and therefore they're as if they're not affected by the tzimtzum, because shehem neshamas atzilas, because they are neshamas of atzilas, and in atzilas, as we've learned previously, the neshamas of atzilas are the neshamas of atzilas, the world of atzilas, and therefore the neshamas which have taken on the characteristic of atzilas. Atzilas is a place where we say Iyo b'gamei he and the lights of the world and the he and the kalim of the world are united, are one. So therefore they continue on with that perception of the oneness of Hashem and of the unity of Hashem, not being covered over by the physicality of the world. But they are the neshamas of Atzilas. They are unique, and they are unique like Kamei Nishmas Moshe, like the neshama of Moshe, but Kamei came B'Nasiya Chabad, as we said, Hinei Etzlam Hu Kamei Kedem Atzimtzum, because their orientation has not changed, and their neshamas are like they are prior to the tzimtzum, shelakusu pshitas, that for them godliness is in a state of pshitas. It is their reality. Godliness and the vision of godliness everywhere is their reality. But tzarech liyager es atzmai, and in fact, they have to work on themselves, lahavi rayas, to bring a proof, sheyesh gam matzias, that the physicality and the constraints of the world actually exist. V'eifin kazeh yegam hakiloi dilosalovei. So now we come to the punchline. That vision that we've just described of the neshamas of Atzilis, that's what will be in the times of the Osid and the times of the future, when our introductory verse where we said the glory of Hashem will be revealed, that is what will be granted to every single person. And then we will have then, continuing the text, Shiel Kusba Pshitas, where we will have godliness in a state of Pshitas, and that will be the perception, godliness will be the perception of everyone in the world. V'hainu, and that is Shekima Sha'oz Yizgala Ha'ed Shekedem Atzimtzum. And then, because at that point, everyone will receive the spirituality, the lights of God, as it was prior to all the concealment via the tzimtzum. And therefore godliness will be in a state of pshitas, and then it'll be understood through our mind, but as well, not only will be seen with the mind's eye, but we'll also see it with our excuse me, with our fleshy eyes. Hence, we go back to our opening verse, Kameshakosov, as the verse says, Venigleh K'vod Havayah, there will be revealed the honor, the glory of Hashem, Barol Kol Bosa, and all the flesh will see, Yachdav Kipi Hashem Giber. They will understand that this comes from the level of the highest level, Inyan Hariya Ba'ena Bosa. And we will see with our fleshy eyes this Behain B'Kidus K'vod Havayah. We will see the level K'vod Havayah, Shehua Eira Makif, which that refers to the encompassing Sevev quality light, which is not normally, which cannot be seen without this high level of existence. Behain B'Chinas Pi Havayah, and also the mouth of Hashem, Shu Er Pnimi, which refers to the internalized Mamala light, Begilu Zeba Efen Yachdav, and that will be a revelation of togetherness, as being together, as the verse said, Ro Kol Bosa Yachdav, they'll all be able to see it united, and we'll see what Kulukulam Shova, and everybody will see it equally as one. Okay, so with that we've answered most of our issues, and we've understood the meaning of the verse. The next little part will just conclude with another level of understanding. So we will. So v'yesh l'kasha zer im masha kosov ki makol tzora itziloni u'ba'oivai ra'asa eini. This pasuk is pasuk Tehillim from 54:9. That's pasuk Nun Daled, chapter Nun Daled and Tes, which was the Tehillim of the Rebbe at the time when he said this, and he was pointing out that this concept of putting the two opposite perceptions, the perception of godliness pervasive, as well, and physicality pervasive, and being able to join the two and seeing godliness everywhere, that's reflected in this verse. Continuing, because he says the first part of the verse, Ki makol sora hitziloni, saving me from all distress, is one expression of God's kindness, and God's kindness is its fullest measure, its complete kindness, and it's a complete overflowing kindness. And then while the second half of the verse, Ve'eve ra'aso eini, and my eyes seeing the retribution visited on my enemies, that's surely an inyan of Gvura, an expression of Hashem's might. This is not the ultimate of Chesed, but this is retribution, and this is the idea of the might of Hashem. But since they're embedded in the same pasuk, in the same verse, they're two opposite thrusts in the same pasuk. Shehein inyonim hafnim. They are two opposite natures. Nevertheless, they exist together in the same verse, because David HaMelech says, "Makol makom yehei beis inyonim beyachad." Those two different movements will converge and be united. The issue who, because at the time in the future, because there will be revelations from above, from the two powers and the two lines, the power of might, of Gvura, but nevertheless the power of Chesed, but they will coalesce together and they will join together. So Kamei Kain, so in a similar sense, or we'll be able to say, in the future, in the ultimate time of goodness, ushered in via Mashiach's presence, we'll have all the light, the limited light of godliness, and the light which is above limitations. The Sefer Kalamat and Mamal Kalamat will be seen by all. And so, as continuing the Maimon, Kamei Kain Yet Losalabe, Basin Yonim de Lamaila, Lamata, or Lamata Lamaila, both ideas of the thrust coming from Lamaila lamata, from above to below, and then the thrust of mata lamaila, from below to above, the all-encompassing light and the immanent light will fuse together, and bedain or kadain, and as they just say, it can be like that and it can be like that, right? There can be gili ha bligvul bisyashras ba'ilmas, that will have the infinite dimension of godliness. It will be revealed, and it will nevertheless rest within the worlds in a way of absorption. Shazehu Mashakosov, and that's the fulfillment of our original verse, how we started our verse, the verse from 94, from 54, which we've just mentioned. Verse 9 will be a reflection of the general concept that we said before, Mashakosov Ro called Bosa Yaktov, Kipi Hashem Diber, that the godliness will be seen, and everything that came from the mouth of Hashem will be seen, and will have coalesce to the highest level. We will see the level of kavod, of the glory of Hashem, and through the level of pi Hashem, which is a diber, which is that Hashem spoke, which is the union of Mamal Kalaman. We'll see them unified. That's the loving, and this revelation, the state of revelation, will be revealed, lost love in the future times. And may it speedily come in our days. Ali Day Mashiach Tzidkenu, through the powers of Mashiach Tzidkenu that bring this revelation from above, together with the ascent from below, which expands our vessels and allows us to receive them. And at the same time, there'll be the flow from above coming down, and we will be able to see it totally. And then we will have physicality being in a way of in a vision of Atzilus, that spirituality is in a way of pshitas, in a way of the nature of everything, and we will see it as a natural revelation. And Metzias, and the idea of constraints, the idea of Metzias, the idea of self-orientation, that will be in an open of Ischachas, and that will change our state of reality, so that the world will be in a higher plane. So with that, we've now finished the Maimon.